Hi, everyone. Welcome joining us this evening. My name's Leonard, and I am a student from the Faculty of Land and Food Systems, and I'm also working here at the UBC Sustainability Hub as the SDG Months Coordinator. It's great to have you all tonight. So for folks on the Zoom, we do have French translation available, and if you have any questions, please let the Zoom moderator know. Before we get started, I would like to take some time for us to acknowledge the land where the UBC Point Grey campus is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh people. Shown in this picture is actually the UBC farm. If you haven't been to the UBC farm before, it's actually located in the Westbrook, not far from here. So the UBC farm is very important. The land is very important because that's where LFAS students engage in nature-based learning, as well as deepening their connections and understanding of the people and the land. As a settler, I'm super grateful for having the privilege to study, learn, and then work on this land, as well as meet with great people like you guys. I also encourage you to take some time to think about the land of which you're on and from. Indigenous perspectives are key to achieving the SDGs by incorporating a holistic approach, including spiritual, physical, mental, and emotional approaches to social and environmental issues. Today's event is an opportunity for us to listen openly and engage to learn, unlearn, and then relearn towards collective achievement of reciprocal relations with the land and the water, and then relatedly, the Sustainable Development Goals. Brought to you by UBC Sustainability Hub, Sustainable Development Solutions Network, SDSN Canada, and the Colleges and then Institutes Canada. SDG Month is a national collaborative initiative that invites all Canadian universities and colleges together to organize workshops, panels, and other interactive programmings in the month of March to increase awareness of and drive engagement of the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. On this slide is a QR code you can scan to learn more about our other SDG Month events happening throughout this March. So pretty much every week we have like 4 to 5 events, and then you're welcome to, and then you're invited to joining us. About UBC Reads Sustainability. UBC Reads Sustainability is a speaker series that invites well-known authors to engage in campus and then community-wide discussions. It's a mix of a book club, lecture series, and an opportunity to learn outside the classroom. Above all, it's a forum for students across disciplines to get to the heart of sustainability issues. The program has been running successfully since 2010 and then has attracted thousands of participants since its inception. Also, a big thank you to Salesian Catering, Pavent, and then the Addis Lando Virtual Learning Center who are making the catering possible for us tonight. Yeah, I'll confirm with you guys later. Yeah. Let me walk you through the event schedule. First, I will introduce our honored guests, Sundance Chief Rueben George, and then Dr. Shannon Leddy. Then we'll delve into the moderated discussion for approximately 1.5 hours, including a Q&A with the audience via Slido. Actually, the Slido is on the slide. If you can scan the QR code, and then you can put your questions in there. The conversation will end at 6:30 p.m., followed by book signing in the atrium. If you have not already, please grab some food and refreshments. Also, the washroom is just outside to the left if you need. Just a heads up that today's discussion topics may be triggering. You do not need to suffer the difficult emotions alone. All mental health resources on the next slide are on the posters in this building. Please see the poster for details on booking a complimentary 15-minute counseling session after event with student counselor Cheyenne Archer at Collective Healing. On this slide is some helpful mental health resources, including 24/7 crisis support for Indigenous people in Canada, as well as general health and then crisis support. Now, let me introduce our guest speakers for tonight. First, we're grateful to have Dr. Shannon Leddy joining us today to moderate this panel discussion with our guest of honor. Dr. Shannon Leddy is a Vancouver-based Métis teacher and a writer whose practice focuses on decolonizing education and advancing Indigenous perspectives in teachers' education. She holds a degree in art history and an anthropology from the University of Saskatchewan, and Master of Arts in art history and then a Bachelor of Education here at the University of British Columbia. Her PhD research at Simon Fraser University focuses on inviting pre-service teachers into dialogue with contemporary Indigenous art as a mechanism of decolonizing education and then in order to help them become adept at delivering Indigenous education without reproducing colonial stereotypes. Dr. Leddy is an associate professor here at the Faculty of Education in the Department of Curriculum and Pedagogy. Next, I'm very honored to introduce Sundance Chief Rueben George. Sundance Chief Rueben George is a member of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. Rueben is a semi-retired therapist and now the manager of the Sacred Trust, Tsleil-Waututh Nation's initiative to protect Burrard Inlet, the traditional Tsleil-Waututh territory from the proposed Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain Pipeline project. Rueben has traveled the world creating allies with Indigenous people who stand for water, land, and human rights. For over 10 years, Rueben is a consultant to multiple businesses and then is the co-founder/president of Salish Elements, a company that creates green hydrogen energy. Rueben is an author whose book It Stops Here made him a national bestseller. Rueben George is a spiritual leader who was adopted and made a Sundance Chief by 2 Lakota families. He is involved in his Salish culture and ceremonies. So without further ado, let's welcome our speakers.
Thank you so much, Leonard, and Talal, welcome. Thank you all for being here. It is really a great honor and a privilege to introduce again Rueben George, who has left us with this remarkable story about persistence, survival, the spirit, and the importance of ceremony. And I would love to give you the opportunity to sort of introduce yourself and tell us what you need to tell us before we actually start a little conversation.
Hi. I sent you the bio, right? You know what people do is they use AI now, and that's pretty close. AI. When I did my audibles, I sit with two editors, and then it goes to a third editor, then it goes to AI. So there's about 20, 30 words that it's not me, it's actually AI, but they couldn't figure out the Hokkaiman words. Or but anyway, and happy to be here, and in anything I talk about around Native spirituality, it's not to disrespect anyone's belief. You know, actually, I pray with everybody, especially in my work. I prayed in the middle of the jungles in Brazil and South America and Central America and Mexico, all across North America and Canada, way, way, way up north in Canada. It's like 30 below or 40 below, and the outbacks in Australia, and this is it goes with my work. And but what I do believe is no matter what we practice, it's all the same. The fundamental teachings of humanity are the same. Love and honor and respect and dignity, pride, compassion, understanding, truth, knowledge, wisdom, courage, and bravery. That's how we're supposed to raise our kids, with all those, and sometimes it's replaced and it's replaced as something that doesn't match any of those fundamental teachings. And what it comes down to, and I say when people come to my ceremony is just about how to be good people. And a lot of people who do come are already good, but I say nothing wrong with making good people better. But I incorporate these values into everything I do. I was pretty crazy when I was younger. If you read my book, you'll see, I was a hurt human being, and the oppressed become the oppressors, and I did become an oppressor. I was disrespectful to women. I was violent towards men, and I did a lot of drugs and drank a lot, but I learned after my very first sweat lodge ceremony to change everything. Every single thing in my life changed after my very first sweat. And since then, I've been incorporating our culture and those same values into everything I do. I mentioned this in my book. When I became a therapist, I was in school and I had an idea of how to create a treatment program. And my grandfather, Chief Rueben George, would say, anything you learn in college and university about healing, there's native teaching that says the same thing. And I put that to the test and hired 2 psychologists and 10 elders, and we took psychological programs and translated them to our own legends and stories and teachings. And it was the same with environment. Peter, by the way, I worked with for 10 years, and Wilderness Committee has been our strongest ally. And I don't know if you remember, Cedar was just a little guy. Now my son's 6'5", and actually he works for Wilderness Committee, who was our first ally, stopping the pipeline. And now you're lucky to have him here as a student and doing his master's. Yes, that's awesome. And but in the environmental work, they said when I sat with the elders, said it's going to cost a lot of money from our own nation, millions. And I said, but we need to stop it. And they said, you could stop it, but just show them our way. And I thought, how could I show them our way of spirit to people who don't even understand they carry a spirit inside of themselves? Well, we did. And that was a 1,200-page assessment, a spill analysis, a clean analysis, multiple economic studies, and then going to Federal Court of Appeal a couple times, air quality test. We just tested the inlet. There's 700 different chemicals, foreign chemicals in our waters right around here. 700 that are foreign. And so we put all that together and sued them, and we won the first one, I thought we won the second one. They said, your economic analysis is right. Never ever recoup over $22 billion, never. But hey, we're going to do that with the best interests of Canada. So even though you're right, we're still going to do this. And you're right, it's going to kill all the orca whales. Remember that, Peter? It's going to kill all the orca whales, but you know what? We're still going to side of the best interests of Canada. And now they said, we'll never ever spend Canadian taxpayers' money. We won't. We'll get investors to do it. So they got the bank to pay for it. So about 10 days ago, did you see this, Peter? 10 days ago, they got 20 million to pay off that debt that they said that taxpayers would never pay. And that was like 10 days ago. But that's the problem that we've been dealing with. But still, we incorporated, hey, my bro here just came in. He works for Salish Elements, my company. So it's good to see you. I'm surprised. We were just in the meeting today. and then, so environmental work, you incorporate our values, but also in business. And when we work with a potential investor and we talk to them, first we start by saying who we are. Then we ask them, we say, do you know the history of what Canada did to First Nations? If they say yes or no, it doesn't matter. We're going to explain it, and we do. And we say, the colonization, what they did, I said, with Tsleil-Waututh were wiped down to 13 people. I said, it was so recent ago. My mom's 62 out of the 13 people. And I said, now, but we're making money to fix that. And right then and there, we'll know if we'll work with them or not, with their reaction. And actually, we did this in our job interviews. And if they say, yeah, I'd love to help, then we'll work with them. And so we incorporate our values in all that I do, and I think it created success. Like spirituality, you pray. You pray for good things. And it's not just something you do a couple hours a week, it's a way of life. And I'm not good at it. I'm not a good example about how to be. I'm not. I go to ceremony to pray, to heal. I need a lot of healing still. I'm pretty dysfunctional still. Ask my kids. But I go there to improve. But when I do, I make it a way of life. And I incorporate the values of what I'm doing in everything I do. And when you believe in something with everything that you are, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and physically, if you believe in it so much, your path to your goal will become easier. And that's where ceremony is involved with that. And in business and stuff, it's meeting the right people, the right place, the right time. Had a meeting, Lummi Nation. You know, I have a history with them in Bellingham, Washington. And, you know, I was shocked. I said, when here with our hydrogen station, we Lillooet, we're going to have our plant there. And then we're going to have filling stations from Vancouver up to Prince Rupert. And we're working with all different nations. And then we're going to build trucks. Looks like by summer, we should have 2 trucks of hydrogen on the go. And then you do our environmental work for it too, to make sure that we're not going to ruin anything, the water, the land, or anything like that. And so when we met with Lummi, they said, we told them all what we're doing, and they said, well, let's sign an MOU right now. Never in my life have I ever heard of anything like that happening in a first meeting with somebody. And we're like, sure, we'd love to work with you guys. And then we're talking into duplicating what we're doing in here, BC, to Washington State. And no fooling too. It's like when we talk to them, we know why we're doing it. We know that since I've been born, half the world's species have died. 60% of mammals have died, and what's left of that, 65% is livestock. It's in atmospheric rivers. And when I think of something, I think, how would I explain this to my grandfather, Chief Dan George, what an atmospheric river is? What fentanyl is? The people dying are the fires, over 1,000 fires this last summer. Explaining that to him. And you know what he'd say is, what are you doing about it? And I bet you each and every one of your grandparents or great-grandparents would say the same thing. And when I started this, it was just me, Ben West, and Rex Weiler, 3 of us. And you know, and people said, you can't do it. Our first town hall meeting was just a handful of people sent out 200 flyers or 1,000 flyers, whatever it was. 13 people or a handful of people showed up. But we didn't give up, and it got to the point that was it 82% or 87% of Burnie B residents supported Tsleil-Waututh Nation in Soon, Canada, for allowing that pipeline to be built because they didn't want it. But that was people properly educated on the economics of it, the destruction that it causes, and the harm that it causes, and who benefits. And they knew that, and they made those decisions around that. But they fixed everything. They're so methodical. They're methodical in how they want to push their agenda forward by creating 2 laws, 1 law for every other Canadian and 1 law for anyone opposing the pipeline. We've seen that in almost the highest court of Canada, the Federal Court of Appeal. We've seen that with my son's ex-girlfriend. She got in a dinosaur suit and climbed the fence, and no charges in her whole life, just a good kid. Played badminton, automatic 30 days in jail. I worked downtown with people that had 30 charges against them, didn't see a day in jail. You know, there's 2 laws. So they're methodical, and we got to be too. And what I do it with, accordance to our Coast law of truth, family, health, and culture, what I do with is fierce love. I do with fierce love. I go to their house. I go to their house in their AGM. And I go and I tell him how we're going to stop him. Richard Kinder, I wanted to debate him. I prayed I would debate him. My family called and said, hey, do you want to go to the AGM? Represent the New York Elders Fund? I said, yeah. I said, pack your things. You got an hour to get to the airport. And I said, done. The next day I walked in their AGM and argued with him. He's yelling at me, get out, get out. And I said, look, he's mad at me because my presentation's right. That's right. I said, I turned around the shareholders and I said, this is who you're invested in? If I was wrong, he wouldn't be mad. Make smart investments with your money. $350 billion company, their stock fell by 60%. Their dividends were cut by 74%. Of course, they got millions again, but I felt good about that for that time. Not saying it was just me and Tsleil-Waututh and Peter and wilderness it was a bunch of things happened to them, but it was still good anyway. And but that's what I pray for, is that conviction. I really pray for it. And, you know, my mom will like read, I'll be on the national news and they say, oh, they're saying horrible things about you. So, okay, and a chubby Indian, what? I said, whatever. I'm going to stand up in the conviction of my family's teachings, of those fundamental teachings of humanity, of all those good things, and do what I got to do with fierce love, because I love my land, I love my people, and I want something for our future generations. Holy smokes. Scared to see what the next 50 years will look like. But anyway, I got lots more to say, you know, I'm happy to be here, and I'm really happy you all showed up. It's nice to see everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much for starting us in that way. There's so much in your book, and so much we had a chance to chat before the event this afternoon. And we spent a little bit of time talking about these three beautiful words in Hunkaminam, Nuatsam Maut, Snowwaith, and Sminoth. Can you tell us a little bit about what those words mean to you and how they come up again and again in your life and in your writing?
So probably a lot of you in your own language and in your cultural teaching, when I do my sweat lodge, I explain what Nuatsam means. One heart, one mind, one prayer. So in my ceremonies, like Sundance, we achieve a higher state of spiritual consciousness through meditation. So we experience a little bit of heaven. And what heaven is, it's to me, to my experience, and to everyone I do ceremony with, it's experience the oneness of everything. Oneness of everything. Imagine this, that two people come together and form a spirit of love. Like every single culture around the world, they honor that spirit of love, and they do a ceremony around it, and they call it marriage. That's the spirit. That's a spirit. Everything has spirit, and that's what we feel and witness and are part of. And you can imagine how beautiful that is of the oneness. And I had family that pass away and come back and explain some of that. They pass away and then they come back. My grandfather, when he was sick, he was like, I was 11 years old, first time I seen it. Everyone was crying because it looks like he was dying, and he sort of looked at everyone and said, stop it. I said, when you cry, you hold me here. Let me go. Been here a long time. I just want to go home and be with my wife. I haven't been seeing her 20 years, and she's there waiting for me. My grandparents are there waiting for me. Just let me go. We left 4 hours later, he passed, but all my family passed that way. My brother recently, a year ago, talked to his wife and said, you know, my grandparents are here. Just let me go. I'm going to kiss you. And he kissed her, and he pulled all his tubes and everything out of him, and he passed away. And that's that oneness, that beautiful place. Lakotas call it Itakiase. That's all my relations. But I know most cultures, when I was in Scotland, I want to talk about that later too. When I was in Scotland, they had words for that. Every culture does of that oneness. That's not Mat. Snowwaith is the next one.
Yep.
That means good teachings. Carry yourself well. So the fundamental teachings, love, honor, respect, those fundamental teachings of humanity. Raise our kids that way. When you raise our kids that way, that's the best way. You know, what we do is we tell them what not to do and how to be. My kids, Tsleil-Waututh tribe, you know, offered, I was living down there, and they said, your kids could go to private school or public school. And this is how we influence. In the public school, they say, if you're really, really smart, you could be a doctor or lawyer. In that private school, they taught them different. They said, no, you're going to be rich, and you're going to be successful, and you're going to run things. She graduated at 15, and every single one of her, classmates all graduated at 15. All 32 of them, and every single one of them took political science and business. Most of them went to Ivy League. My daughter Kaya got 24 invitations of universities in that classroom. They had no less than 4 teachers in that room at once. Now, in the schools that we're dealing with today, you know, the teachers can't teach because they're focusing their time on 15%, 80% of their time on 15% of the students. 5% are unteachable because they have disability, and 10% have trauma. And that's what we're stuck in. So some don't make it, but what they're doing for themselves is making sure they make it. But what I'm saying is we're told what to do. In my ceremonies, if I'm not teaching you to surpass me, I'm failing. Do better. Do better and do great things. Whatever you choose to do great at. And that's what my grandfather did. He said, how long are you going to act? He goes, I don't know, until I'm the best. And he won a Grammy. He's in an Emmy and for music, and then is nominated for Academy Award. Clint Eastwood said, I have to throw you parties for the Academy to come to so they get to know you and then they'll vote for you. That's what we do. He goes, I don't care. As long as I'm nominated, that's fine enough. And of course, he didn't win, but that's carry yourself in a good way. Snow White is this last one. Sort of the same thing, teachings, but it comes from your spirit too. That your spirit and yourself are making the decisions of your life, and some of it's royalty too. My grandfather and my grandmother were the last arranged marriage in our people. They didn't meet until the day they got married. My grandma saw them, started crying, no. But they loved each other forever, and it was beautiful. But yeah, those are them.
That is lovely. Thank you. You gave me some teacher anxiety flashbacks there. I used to be a high school teacher, and what you say is 100% true. Like it's a lot to get through. So I'm glad your children had good experiences that way. And thank you for sharing those words. Yeah, I'm a Métis person, but I have a Cree elder who does learn the Cree language from her, and we have very similar words to all of those. And so when I read them in your book, they were very resonant, and I appreciated that. And I think that leads to some conversation about the impacts of colonization. But I can't ask you a question about that without also saying or talking about the importance of ceremony in terms of how you personally and how many members of your family overcame a lot of the impacts from residential school, from all kinds of social, cultural, physical, sexual violence. So I wondered if you could talk about how ceremony led you onto the path that you're on now.
Mm-hmm. When I was young, I drank a lot, and the drugs not as much, but what I got stuck with is I never really went out and pick fights. And I feel bad about this, but when you're in a nightclub and you want to, I would watch and I'd see a bully, and I'd stand in his way, and when he's walking by, he'd hit me. Like he'd push me, and then we'd fight. It got so bad to the point that people come to me in a nightclub, because I was a nightclub person and I had VIP pass at every major club in Vancouver, and they'd come up to me and they say, you Rueben George? And I say, yeah. They say, let's go. And I look at my friends and say, I'll be right back. And I'll go fight and come back. But what it was is when you're jumping off a cliff into water, or parasailing or parachuting, you get the adrenaline and you get scared. And every fight I got in, I got scared, but I liked it. But it was dysfunction. It was hurt and it was pain. My grandfather, it's in the book, he went to residential school, and I don't think this part is actually when there is one part in there about residential school, but this one, it's not in there. I didn't know for a long time why he had no finger here. And when he was 5, they cut off his finger because he couldn't speak English. And of course he saw murders and stuff and of little kids like my mom did. And of course they're thinking, am I next? And then it's mental, emotional, physical, sexual, spiritual trauma, because spiritually the priests and nuns are saying, You pray to God. I pray the person that's hurting me won't hurt me. And that's them telling the one that's telling them to pray to God. So they come out with no belief. So from birth to 10 years old, that's the foundation you're always going to come back to. So half of that foundation was hurt and pain and trauma. And so if it's not dealt with, and this is how I see it, and when you go to school around psychology, you could learn about healing mentally and emotionally and physically, but not spiritually. And that's what I do. And that's what I did in helping people. Like spiritually, I told you, two people come together and form a spirit of love. Two people come together and form a spirit of trauma. That's a spirit. And it's alive because you react to it. In psychology, they explain it, how it works. But what it's like an open wound on your arm that needs stitches and antibiotic, and that you heal it. But you could inherit those open wounds from your parents and grandparents. And I know I did from my grandpa, because some of the things he didn't deal with. And I for sure know I did from my mom. And I know I did from my dad, because he died. He overdosed on Main and Hastings in an ugly bathroom. There's Main and Hastings, then there's some stairs. And my son and I just went there 10 days ago, and we did a ceremony there. Just to pray for all those people that die there. And so we went down there, and they knew what we're doing. There's addicts, and they're not doing wood, and they saw that we had smudge, and they said, hey, don't go down there. They're going to do ceremony. That's what they told the other guys. And they're just good that way. And so we went down there and did our ceremony, but he didn't get a chance to heal those wounds of those pain that he experienced in residential school. And they saw murders in there. Little kids. Mom saw a nun kick a kid in the head, and sorry, there's no nice way of saying this, fell down, died. My mom didn't know what to do. They said, get out, class is over and you have to leave. And my mom was the first one to go out the door, and she couldn't step over the kid. Slapped her in the ear so hard her ears ringing, she had to step over. But those things I inherited, and that's why I was the way I was. So ceremony, my grandpa died, and that's the only one at that time, because in Tsleil-Waututh, when I was young, probably 99% of the people drank or did drugs that were adults, and probably 80% unemployment. So when my grandpa died, he was the only one that I knew wouldn't hurt me. And when he died, I said, I'm not going to cry anymore. I was 11. And then I went to my first ceremony. And is that better? I went to my first ceremony. Okay. My first sweat lodge. And
Now we know what that one was for.
yeah. There we go. And they said, it's your turn to pray. And I went, how do I do that? And they said, introduce yourself to your ancestors, because they're going to help you. I said, what? They said, say, my name is Rueben George, and I come pray to you. And I said, okay, I could do that. So I did that, and I said, now what? And then they said, pray for good things. And I get emotional when I think about it. And then, so 11 to 23, I didn't cry. And I went to pray, and I just opened my mouth, and I just bawled my eyes out, and I didn't know what happened. And I cried for like 4 hours. And I couldn't even hug people when I was at that point. Birthday hugs, and even my girlfriend, when we'd sleep with each other, I'd pull my arm out away from her and put a pillow in between, then I'd go to sleep. I couldn't sleep with somebody touching me. I was so rigid and so hurt and so dysfunctional from hurt and pain and trauma throughout my life. And I crawled out after crying for 4 hours, never hugging anyone for those from 11 till 23. And I crawled out, and these two guys stood there, and they picked me up and hugged me. And I was like, wow, the first hug I had in my life, it felt like. And since then, I've been going to sweat lodge ceremony every week for 33 years now. Now I run it. And I remember they said, hey, one day you're going to run the ceremony, so shut up and listen. And I was like, how am I going to run a ceremony? I'm just trying to live till next week. What are you talking about? And then I do. It's odd to be made a a Coast Salish guy to be made a Sundance Chief from a family in South Dakota, two families. And as one of the leaders in our longhouse, I'm building our first longhouse in over 120 years in Tsleil-Waututh lands. Some people don't need as much as me. I just need it all the time because I'm dysfunctional. And people say sometimes they think they're all impressed by me. Oh, Rueben, spiritual guy. And I said, wait till you get to know me. I said, I'm not how you think. And I just like praying and I have good things to say. And it really helps in my family. By the way, that first sweat lodge came to our community, and we're about 90% people drinking, drugging, and 80% quit. And then we're about 80% employment. We went to 0% unemployment. Now we're on 3 or 4%, and it's all due to ceremony. Out of my mom's family, there's a lot of people adopted, and in-laws and all that stuff. We have about 35 from my mom down, and none of them drink or do drugs. It's they all practice culture. It's funny because I wrote a book on the news and traveling the world. Any one of them could do what I do. Any one of them, they just want me to do this. And same with my cousins. They're like that too. All of them could come and speak like I do. They said, it's your job. You do that. I go, why? No, I just kidding. My kids do, actually. My kids, they spoke at United Nations before they're probably 22, about 5 times each. And they travel the world still, and they do a lot of good work. My son, actually, Peter's our first ally fighting the pipeline 14 years ago. My son was just a little kid, and now he works there, and it's pretty awesome. It's like full circle. But anyway, that's it.
Thank you. That was a beautiful discussion of the importance of ceremony, and I really appreciate the humility, because it does sometimes feel like that. Like people ask you to do things, and you're like, "But I'm just some kid. But why?" So I think that's a really important part of this kind of work. One of the things, now that you've mentioned your children again and your mother, it was really interesting to read through your book, because every once in a while I'd be like, "Oh, I know your cousin Brad," or I've met, as we talked about earlier, I've met Lee Brown a few times. And you've got, your book is in many ways this amazing who's who of Indigenous activists and thinkers and leaders. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that, about how, particularly those family connections, because it's like there's no line between those family relationships and your ceremony community and all of this work that you do together. I wonder if you can share some thoughts about that. And I will remember to ask you about Scotland.
When my dad died, I guess I searched out a lot of father figures, and that was Lee Brown, Phil Lane, Leonard Crodog, whole bunch of iconic. Like there, a lot of the guys, the Ames movement leadership. They became like my mentors. And actually, I didn't tell you this, Peter, but when we decided to fight the Kinder Morgan pipeline, I went to South Dakota and I talked to the Ames guys, and I said, "What should we do?" He said, "First get your community and grow it from there and go national." I said, "How am I going to do that?" But we did. We went global. And I think that's a big part of it. And another thing too is spirituality. When I was young, when I was 23, when I started, it was a small community, and so I got to know who's who across North America, and we'd hear about things, and we say, "Well, let's go check that out." And it wasn't out of the ordinary to go travel 8 hours to go to a sweat lodge somewhere, and we would do things like that. And I was really lucky because I'd go to, like, travel the world, and there's other cultures that do a higher state of spiritual consciousness and ceremony, and I'd always get shocked. I met this elder from grandma, from how we met was she's in Guatemala. She's like, she comes up and she goes, "Hey son, do you know why we love each other?" I said, "Yeah, I do." She goes, "I'll tell you anyway." She goes, "The stars are the reflection of heaven. I see these stars in your eyes like you see them in my eyes. And we both know we experienced heaven. Because the higher state of spiritual consciousness before heaven is the stars. And then you go into heaven." And so I ran into that in Guatemala, Brazil, um, Panama, Australia. Within an hour, they adopted me in Australia. They knew, we knew, and we started talking, and the elder just said, "Go get the paint. We'll paint him up, and he'll dance out with us." It's like, okay, and it was beautiful. They knew, and so I I I, I sort of seeked it, but didn't. I wanted to be a part of it, and but they thought it was weird that I'm from North America and that I got spirituality. They're like, "You, how'd you do that?" And I said, "I pray hard."
But it sounds like you're also like you're following this path, and when a door opens, you have the sense to go through it, and these things just keep, you're traveling more and more and speaking with people in the wider and wider world. And yeah, does it feel like that? Like, does it feel like it's
Oh,
sort of a
100%.
matter of, yeah, going
I-
with the flow?
I did a ceremony on Saturday for MLAs, and they're interested. They're interested. I did a ceremony for another thing I do is I work with Gabor Mate and a bunch of other cool doctors and psychologists there. So I'm actually going back into the healing field, but I never ever thought I'd do this in my life because being sober for 30 years now, I never ever thought. But I started looking at psychedelics, and I was working all these doctors and therapists. And for 6 months, they say, "Hey, maybe you should try it." And I said, "No, no, we're spiritual and we're sober. We don't do that." And then I was sitting there after 6 months, and I was with all my bros. They're former chiefs of their nations, and they're a lot like me. And I said, "You know what, guys?" And they said, "What?" I said, "It's our own teaching that we can't tell somebody what to do unless we're willing to do it ourselves." And they all went, "Oh no!" So we did it, and it's a higher state of spiritual consciousness when you do it right. And when we did it, all the doctors and therapists were creating a program with. We came out of it, and they said, "We're changing everything. We're changing everything." And we did, and we created a program. And I did a ceremony with some really wealthy people, and just by coincidence meeting them, but they're interested in spirituality, and one guy in Nebraska, he owns like 20,000 acres, is a multi-billionaire, and one ceremony he came out and said this, and there's all those 20 acres was a hunting ranch, and he came out and said, "This ain't a hunting ranch anymore, it's a healing center." Knocked it down, built a $13 million healing center, and they've been doing it. And that's part of it. We want to help people that need it. And here the thing about it is and I work with some of the best. Like we just end up being friends. Like Paul Stamets got a movie out on Netflix called Fantastic Fungi. We call each other brother. And me and Gabor, I introduced him on March 9th at the Queenie Theater, sold out. And he goes, "You want to introduce me, brother?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, I guess it's you'll speak like 10 minutes and I'll do the rest." And I said, "Just like our dinners?" And then he messages me and he goes, "Well, I guess it matters when who has something worthwhile to say." And I said, "Yeah, and it only takes me 10 minutes." And he goes, "For now, you got me, brother." But but they when we're in ceremony and Sundance, you don't eat or drink for 4 days and you're dancing 12, 16 hours a day. And then when you're lucky enough, you achieve the higher state of spiritual consciousness. When we do with the psychedelics and it's done right, I bring them to that place. But here's the thing. When you're in that place, that's where you can create change. You can. And we always knew that. But Paul Stamets explained it to me scientifically. He said, your brain receptors are receptive to change after your first third of the ceremony. So if it's 3 hours after the first hour, your brain receptors are receptive for change. We put 150 residential school elders through our program. that saw murders and were raped by nuns and priests and got pregnant and had a baby, and the baby is incinerated. All these horrible things happened to them. And then one elder couldn't hold her kids, her grandkids. No, she couldn't hold her kids. And she goes, I want to hold my grandkids. Came out, changed. We gave him that change. 150 elders, nothing but good results. 400 people so far. 2 people didn't sober up, but they just didn't want to quit drinking. And that's a really good stat. And thank you. So we with what you're saying, I do follow spirit with that. I do. And here's the thing though. When you come to ceremony for me and you want to come to a Sundance in a higher state of spiritual consciousness, I teach you sweat lodge first. How to smudge, a pipe ceremony, a vision quest. Then after a year or 2, then we'll invite you to Sundance. You came, right? Yeah. Yeah. And we'll take you to Sundance, you witness. Then if you choose, you could dance, and then you experience that. And it takes all years for some people to get to that point. But with this medicine, that ceremony, we give it to them. And but here's the integration, and this is different from any other psychedelic that's out there. What I just explained about, we teach you sweat, pipe, and all those other things. Those are the protocols. So that's our integration. We integrate so they could know these things to have the tools that they need to move forward. But it's a running start. To help our elders the way we did is just amazing. Amazing. So we crossing our fingers. We did a ceremony for a really wealthy person. And she came out and said, well, let's get you what you need to have a full center. And I said, okay. So we sat down with her business person and went over a whole bunch of stuff, and we'll see what happens. But it has to be in our territory, because we want to do under our own law, not the colonial law, our own law of truth, family, health, and culture. And then we want to give our services to everybody. People who could pay for it will pay for it, and that will supplement the First Nations or other people who can't. And yeah.
That's amazing. And the story about the person that owned the ranch that wanted to turn it into a healing center, that gave me full body goosebumps. So clearly super powerful work. I want to give you a chance to speak about Scotland, because that was transformative for you. But I also, one of the things that I took away from reading the book was that the idea of being a warrior in the face of companies, corporations that just say, we're going to do it anyway. And that particularly pivotal moment of having as you said earlier, the federal court of, our federal appeal court making a decision, and then having the Liberal government work to have that turned over 2 years later. I mean, that persistence, that warrior spirit that you have cultivated within yourself and carry with you. I wonder if you could speak a little bit about that, because it also seems that that's something that your children are taking away from their learnings with you, and that they're moving forward as well.
Not just us, but all our allies, like Peter. You know, his 10 years of doing the hard work. You know, he came to ceremony, and the very first time we started, we had the founders of Greenpeace and Wilderness Committee come to ceremony for 6 months before we did any work. We wanted to show them why we're doing what we're doing, but also have a tool to help us, because, you know, remember in the very beginning, Stephen Kelly is an economist, did 20% of Kinder Morgan's application on behalf of Kinder Morgan, submitted to the National Energy Board, which is the CER now, submitted to the National Energy Board to review it and approve it. But before they started reviewing it, they hired Stephen Kelly, who did 20% of Kinder Morgan's application, to review his own work. And we said, hey, wait a minute, you can't do that. They said, oh, we'll fix it. And then they said, look, we hired First Nations. And I said, they work for you too. What the hell are you doing? But it was like that every step of the way, everything. And yeah, it's like that.
Yeah.
But we prayer, that's all it is. Because actually, of that first meeting, about 20 people, I'm the only one left.
Wow.
Oh, my kids.
Yeah.
They were only like 12. They're still there. And yeah. But Scotland.
Yeah.
So wrote the book with Mike, my bro, and he set up a book tour over there. We did some like 10 speaking engagement in 8 days or something crazy. And but it's sort of funny because I I run ceremony and people come to me all the time going, and they don't look native at all, and they'll say, my great great grandma's a First Nation princess. Like, oh, well, that's cool. And then I go to Scotland, my great grandpa's Scottish. And I go in there and I'm looking native and I go, I'm Scottish. But they, you know what? They loved it. And my next couple of speaking engagements, they welcome me with bagpipes, which I love. I just love bagpipes. I did my DNA and I was like shocked that I was only 42% non-native. And I was like, what the hell? And my son says light and he comes, looks, yep. But and I was 22% Scottish and I knew, but I was still shocked. For some reason I knew, but I was shocked. And so they'd welcome me with bagpipes. And it was so amazing. And then a couple times they would in the lunch break, they'd bring out all the instruments and just start playing these beautiful songs and singing. And I started thinking, because I started looking to do who I am, my family did, who we are here in North America, because there's 30 million Scots in North America and there's only 5 million over in Scotland. But I started looking into it, and we're the McDougall clan. And our last name's Cole. And so I went to Scotland. They said Cole comes from the C in McDougall. That's so you are McDougall. And then they found that out. So they brought McDougall's, my family, to meet me. And it was so touching. They Googled me and they did research on me, and of course there's a book tour, so they were looking at my book, and I got there, and the elder just is staring at me, and the rest of the family's all talking. He's staring and staring, staring, and then I finally went over and I said, thank you for welcoming me to the clan. And he started crying. And this is a tough looking elder and as tall as big as me. And he goes, you're not the clan. You're my family. I see it in you. You're McDougall. And he hugged me and I started bawling my ears out of my eyes. And but what I found, and I think this is important, is that Canada is cultureless in a way. It is. And what I encourage is people to, when they come to my ceremony, I said, even Lakota teacher said, this isn't your way, but this will help you find your way. And I did go back to my Kosila ceremonies. I did, but I still love both and I still do both. So people come to my ceremony, I said, explore who you are. Find out who you are. Find out who your culture is. Find out your history. I said, maybe there's some trauma there that you need to take care of that's been passed down to you. But remember, there's good things. There's good teachings that are passed down to you too. And that's probably part of your character. And I started finding out too, and a real McDougall, our humor and everything's the same. It's the same. Oh, that's my mom calling. She always calls and it is.
Aha.
She is. Sometimes I answer, Mom, I'm doing a presentation. Well, you coming over or not? It's like, I can't talk. Why? I just told you.
Get her on speakerphone.
Yeah.
We'll try.
Yeah, I do sometimes. But and what I found there too is that every moment that I got with them, they would pull me aside and teach me who I am. And then some of it was sad. They said, we're sitting in this place, in a remote place in Scotland. They said, you see that mountain over there? They said, yeah, this is like our reservation here, called Croft. There's a Croft right there. But they rounded up all my cousins together and they burnt down their houses. Then they put them on a ship that was just right there and sent them to Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And then one elder's crying, saying, yeah, residential school hurt us too. They abused us, hurt us, raped us, and everything that you went through, we went through. And then when I was in the presentation too, and I talked, and then somebody had a question. He goes, "Let the truth be known. The people that colonized you colonized us," and it's so emotional. But then they did the same. They did the same thing we did, and that's what they did. Even though the topic I was talking about was hard, they brought out their musical instruments to help heal the room, and they got elders to speak to help heal the room. They still had their legends and stories and teachings, and I explained how we did it as our law. Tsleil-Waututh means people of the inlet. Why? Because our mother comes from there. That's still our mother. What does a mother do? Feeds you. We broke it down to a science that 80% of our traditional diet came from there, and that was the premise of our 1,200-page assessment to stop the pipeline. I said, your legends and stories are your law. I said, why don't you just, and I kept on hearing about their sweat lodges, and I said, just build one. No, we don't want to bastardize your ceremony. You won't. You do things by 3. In this community, by 3. Run 3 rounds. I said, sing your songs and tell your legends and stories and interpret them. I said, do that. Because the biggest questions that I had there is how similar we were and how similar our cultures were. And then they told me who I am as a Scotsman. Then I told them, I said, well, start it. Do it. We don't want to bastardize your way. I said, no, do it your way. Do it our way. Do it the Scots way. They said, okay, we'll build it. So they're building sweat lodges. And I think I started a spiritual revolution in Scotland. I really do. I think I did. But so I'm going to go back. I have to go to actually Norway. We're buying our electrolyzers for our hydrogen plant. And so I'm going to, it's only a ferry boat over. So I'm going to go visit my relations again. I went to my castle. They teaching me language. They're still sending me stuff. I just really want to learn a song, and it's really hard though. But what I'm saying is, like in the book, explore who you are. Explore it, and don't forget who you are, and celebrate who you are. In school it starts, like I said, in elementary school, they tell you who to be. Who you are. My son, when he went to the private school, my daughter did really well. My son said, Dad, don't make me a robot. Principal called and said, your son made the teacher cry. You better come get him. And I was like, what the hell? And I went down there and they said, what happened? Cedar said this and this. And I said, no, I'm not asking you. I said, son, what happened? He goes, Dad, I'm not a robot. Don't make me a robot. Let me be myself. They do everything together like robots. They're not themselves, Dad. Can I be myself? I said, I'm taking my son out. Right at that moment, took him out. And he thrived. And his different, in my language, it's called Hayoka. No, in Lakota, it's called Hayoka. Here it's called, I can't say the word, but it's a backwards spirit, and it's always contra. And I'd explain to his teachers, because he'd say, I know the answer. And they said, yeah, he does everything opposite, because he'd give the opposite answer every time. That's just the character of who he is. But we celebrate that because he'll flip the energy. So at a funeral, everyone's serious. Everyone's at a funeral being really serious. And then my son's making me laugh. Like, well, shut up, get in trouble. And then they said, elder in front of us, so who's that making all this funny noises? And they turn around looking at Cedar and they go, oh, it's Cedar. And they start laughing too. But it's accepted in our culture for him being who he is. And it should be that for everybody. Everybody, because you're beautiful just the way you are. You're really beautiful just the way you are. Only 2% of the world look like the people on TV. Right? You're beautiful the way you are. Sorry for swearing. But what comes along with that too is don't give no fucks. Sorry. But don't.
You're telling the truth.
Don't. Just be who you are. Just be who you are. And I do. And I teach my kids that. I forgot your question, but I was just rambling. Oh, Scotland. Scotland.
You're entertaining.
Scotland is who I am too. And a Scotsman and a McDougall. And I celebrate all those parts of who I am. And they taught me a bit of my culture there. And helped me close those wounds while I was there from my dad's side of the family. And I didn't know about that dark history. But more importantly, I learned the good history and the good things and the good ceremonies. And that's Scotland for me.
Well, I think that's really beautiful, and it's really, it says something when you are, you know, when you're recognized by your people and people that you didn't even really, you know, think of yourself maybe as related to or part of, but that welcoming spirit. And I think it probably has to do with who you are and the openness that you carry with you where you go. It makes it, I'm sure, easy for people to want to say, well, like, come on, then let's work together. Let's talk things through. I'm conscious that we're sort of close to the end of our conversation time and ready for perhaps questions. We might be slightly ahead of schedule, but I think that there were some that came up online earlier. I don't know if I'm meant to ask if people in the audience have questions or if I'm only meant to use the slide, just the slide deck. Okay, so let's see what we've got.
Was that a yes or no? Questions from the audience?
Just the slide, okay.
Let's take a couple questions from them. Sure.
I'm curious about your teachers. Like, how are your teachers guiding you right now in your life? Obviously, they've been guiding you for a long time, but just in this moment, in this particular time, how are your teachers guiding you?
Actually, it's a transition happened 10 years ago. We did a big ceremony and about 300 people came out in Tsleil-Waututh Gymnasium, and our elders were standing up front and they were sort of running things, and the elder said, our elder said, oh, and then they stopped, and is Lee Brown, and he said, our elders are gone. We're the elders now, and it's our turn to sit back. And they pointed over to me and three other of my friends, and they said, it's your turn. And they put down the mic and said, it's your turn. So in a way too, that was a transition. I think I get sad a bit because I want to go to my elders, but they tend to come to me more and tell me more, ask me questions now and ask me for help. And I'm happy to do that. So I asked my friends to step it up. So I go to them more. I go to my friends, my peers more, and we take care of our elders now. And but if I really ask them hard, and then they'll help me. But Phil Lane, I think he's probably the most active in wanting to give me. He's my adopted dad, like Crow Dog was, and but Phil Lane's pretty active, and I could call him still.
Beautiful, thank you. I know someone on Slido has asked, what is your ask or call to action to Premier Eby?
Such a mess. It's such a mess. And well, first off, fund our hydrogen. First off, fund that. Our competition, which I don't like to say because I think anyone doing hydrogen's good, but we're approaching them soon about that. We got a plan about that. It's a good time to do it because I have about 10 friends that have come to ceremony in the past that are MLAs and are people that I worked with, people that we worked with, and so I think that's a good ask. And you know, it's like, don't put any more money to it, and you know, it's their own studies show that it doesn't make sense, and the people that are benefiting are still, what is it, 60% of the companies using it are actually more than that are not even Canadian companies. They said, who's it benefiting? And just stop it. Stop it. I was actually approached. They wanted to put chlorine through it, not chlorine. No, they use it for making hydrogen. No, yeah, and I said, what, are you crazy? That's worse than, if that has a spill, it's going to create some bigger disaster. So let's just stop that damn pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That seems reasonable.
Yeah, and it's hard too because most nations negotiated now. Almost all of them. I think there's just a couple of us that haven't. So it's hard, the political pressure of other nations trying to get us to jump aboard. But I was almost to say something I'm not supposed to, but yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. I see a hand here.
Do you have any words of wisdom for coping with the shifts that are going on south of the border? I feel every day just such a sense of sickness and concern and fear. Help.
Yeah. So I presented speaking with a lot of the chiefs. It's called the Affiliated Tribes of the Northwest of Oregon, Idaho, Washington, and Montana. Regionally, there's pockets like that of chiefs, and then there's the whole organization of all the chiefs. So the affiliated tribes, I presented to them and said we should do a ceremony just to protect our Salish Sea, and they said sure. And then they phoned after the election. They said, oh, we're not going to wait till summer. We're going to do it right away. Because everyone is like, I was like you, like my ex-girlfriend worked for one of the big environmental organizations, First Nation or Native American in Colorado. And I seen her work, and I worked with her on some things, and it was 20 years of creating environmental policy. And I phoned her and just really sad, and I said, 20 years of work is just wiped out. It is. That's what she predicted, and a couple of days ago, she said, yeah, it's getting wiped out. And so it is like that. But when I talked to the affiliated tribes, they phoned me again too, and they said, let's do our ceremony right away. And I said, okay. And they said, you know, we've been through this before with Reagan. We've been through a whole bunch of troubles like this. And look at our ancestors, what they've been through. I said, when something bad happens, we get up and brush ourselves off with the ceremony and start to work again. And that's what I do. I said, you know, and with prayer is so important. This is in my book. I forgot what it was. It's a big ugly thing happened. Maybe that's when they bought the pipeline. Maybe I can't remember. But I was pretty discouraged, and I was driving from North Van to Vancouver over the Second Narrows Bridge. I said, "Holy smoke, Creator, show me some hope. I have no hope right now. Just give me some hope." I'm just so upset. And then traffic got really thick, and I got to the top of the bridge, and the traffic stopped. I said, "This is not the hope I wanted." and I looked over, and it's incredible to me was a dandelion. And I thought, God, these trucks are going by and some dirt fell off. Trucks are going by and a seed, dandelion fell. And against all the elements of living in a concrete on a bridge, and with all the wind and the oil and the gas and all this horrible things going on, it still grew up and became a beautiful dandelion. Just a beautiful dandelion. And I looked and I said, thank you for the hope. I'll be like that dandelion, not fight, not continue to fight, not continue to grow. And so I say, let's all be flowers. Let's all be our dandelion.
Thank you. I made all the questions go away, but then I figured out how to bring them back. So all is well. So there's another question here. What is the future of Indigenous land rights, and what are important legal frameworks to be cognizant of, and how can Indigenous people seek better legal protections?
Well, one thing I think of is I was working on this with Uncle Len before he passed. And we're looking at what we did against the TMX Kinder Morgan pipeline. We did a 1,200-page assessment, a spill analysis, clean analysis, multiple economic studies, air quality tests, water tests. We did all that on one topic based on Tsleil-Waututh Nation law, Coast Salish law, truth, family, health, and culture, and then our own law, and the fundamental teachings of humanity. And I said, we were talking and talking. I said, let's do that with every department in Tsleil-Waututh. Let's do with education, social services. Let's do the economic development. Let's put this much resources into everything and create a governance model that, they don't teach the history of what Canada did to the First Nations anywhere. But, you know, like we did to Kinder Morgan, I say, hey, there's our document. That's our law. Abide by our law or we're going to sue you. And create change like that. So we're working on that, and it fell apart after he died. But Haidikwa, I believe, did that. Actually, I have to leave right away because I got a meeting with the Chief Gujal who created the title agreement for Haidikwa. And yeah, and that's the same idea. That's the same idea is to create that governance, and that's part of what we want to do. So along the way, when we create resources, that's what we want to do. When I first started consultant business, the guy became my buddy. He made his first billion at 27. And he asked me, said, when you make money, what do you want to do? I said, I want to do an environmental center and a healing center. And he goes, why are you thinking so little? And I got offended and I said, what? He goes, why are you thinking so little? He said, just think bigger. And that's where that came up with. Because that would be the law for people to ground themselves to say, this is how you're going to talk with us. This is how you're going to negotiate. And we sort of have it because we have protocol agreements with the police. We have we have protocol agreements. Anyone who wants to do major development in Vancouver need a Tsleil-Waututh Nation permit. We deal with 500 permits, referrals a year. That if they want to build on our land, not your houses, but big developments. As you build on our land, we're going to do our own environmental assessment. We're going to do a dig to see if there's remains. We're going to do a historical study, and guess what? Kinder Morgan didn't do it, and that's the premise of how we sued them. And so we have most of it in place already, Tsleil-Waututh, but we need to structure it more so it has more teeth in it, so we could control more of our land of where we're at. But if we do that, and when we make money with our hydrogen, damn rights we're going to do it, because they still take advantage of nations way up north when they want to develop something here on already developed land in Vancouver. We take between 50 and 70%. We do, and that's our land. But way up north, they're doing a project. Said, yeah, I can make $10 million. Well, how about we give you 100,000? Who they could screw over around environmental or economics, they still do, and they still will. And I want to do something about that, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. We talk about that today in our meeting today. It's like, what is our goal? Save lives, for sure. Save the environment, for sure. But to help people too. And that's what a government system will bring. And mind you, I say really good things, but I got really smart people that I work with. I do, because I need them. I could have a vision and idea, but we have a smart team. I'm not an engineer. We got good engineers, yourself and everyone else. And even in work, I have two awesome policy analysis, two really good lawyers, and they make me look really smart.
It's important to surround yourself with good people, right? There's a question here. What would you like to see updated in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples?
My friend Jewel James and Lemmy was heading that. And I think it's a good start. Just start it and do it honestly. Don't take it like Canada did and British Columbia did and tweak a couple words so it doesn't have any teeth in it. Yeah. Just do that. But what I believe, I think I still believe in a national effort like that. But I like the idea of what we're doing to Tsleil-Waututh, what Haida did, and we'd like to see help all those nations across. You know, and some of the communities I know that we're going to work with, suicide every week. It's brutal. It's still ugly. It's still really, really ugly. And I know if we help people, and they say that, they say, you know, a couple of years ago, I was helping a community. They said, you could help us? Yeah, economically we are. No, help us after. I said, damn rights I can. With this governance structure model, of course we can. That's what we want to do. That's what we want to create. And so it's good that that's happening. And I quit following it as much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Should we take one from here?
Would you like to? Sure.
Anyone?
Oh, you're paying attention. I was looking at you.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to be here. This has been a really wonderful conversation. And I wanted to ask, I'm interested in what you brought up about the backward spirit, about that your son embodies that kind of disrupts the energy of something and kind of goes against that. I wonder if you can speak more about that and the importance of that and embodying that kind of backward spirit.
I think a big part of it is their energy field's 10 times bigger than anyone else's. And when I first really realized that he was a Hayoka, or is when we're driving along the highway, and I saw these deer jumping across the highway, and the cars going fast, and I think this might be in the book, and the car in front of us hit it. Just before it gets hit, you're going to make yourself real stiff and brace yourself to get hit. So the deer did that, and it flew over a roof, but it went over his energy field, and he straightened. And he barely seen what happened, but he straightened and he goes, why did it have to die? And I went, wow. And so I went down to him and I said, this is who you are, son. And he got it right away. And actually, one thing that helped is we went to a psychic fair, and somebody came up and looked at my son and said his backward spirit, it's called Rainbow Children or Crystal Children. And he gave us 2 books. And it was bang on with what they say in Hayoka, or what we say in our culture. And so how I utilize them now is because they flip energy. In my sweat lodge, there's a heaviness that happens when people are not releasing, and I feel it. There's a heaviness when somebody's about to cry, but they're holding it in. And I just have to look at my son and I said, do you feel that? He goes, yeah, pass the bucket. So I pass him bucket to run the ceremony. And with his energy, he'll flip that energy and help them to release. And but that's just one example. But you can look up Hayoka. You can look up Crystal Children. You know, now they're diagnosed with all these mental disabilities. And they tried to do that to my son. You know, like me, they said, Rueben has a learning disability. I didn't have a learning disability. I had sleep deprivation because my house is chaotic. And Cedar, it's like kindergarten, and they had a psychologist there, and they said, what the hell is he doing here? I said, oh, we're going to give him a psychological evaluation. I said, bullshit. I said, leave my son alone. You know, and they did, and you know, then I'd explain to his teachers to say he does things opposite. And that's when that teacher did say he does. And they learned how to talk to him. They said, Cedar, it's okay, you do that. But when you do that, all the other kids think they could do that, but they get in trouble. So maybe you don't want to get in trouble, and maybe don't do that. And he goes, that makes sense. So you had to learn how to talk with him, right? And then when he's little, I'd say, don't touch that's electricity, that socket. Don't put nothing in there too. And then not even a second later, what are you doing? He goes, I don't know. So I have to be careful. But yeah.
The children. Thank you. Fekre has asked, I appreciate you celebrating the oneness of all earth beings and beyond. How do you approach the balance between sharing and protecting culture and teachings?
There's yeah, it goes in levels, I guess. In our Coast way, we don't share anything. We don't. And even when I wasn't a member of that society, I'd ask a question. They said, well, if you want to know, take the rest of your life off and we'll teach you. I said, okay, I don't want to know. But I do know. And but in Lakota, Crow Dog wrote a book. And he part of the prophecy is they will help people learn a lot of what we forgot. And so I do share all that, what he shared. And of course, there's some things that are sacred that we see no cameras, don't talk about it. But I think I have a good handle on that because Crow Dog taught me personally. He sat with me a lot personally, and not just him, but all my teachers did. I spent a lot of time with them, and I think I have a good handle on what I can say and what I can't say. And some people get mad. You're not supposed to say that. I said, why? Well, at home we don't. I said, where are you from? Oh, I'm from back east. Well, you could do that there, and I'm here on Coast Salish territory. And no disrespect. But it's like that though, because some people will be like the Sweat Lodge police. You can't build that. I go, why? Where are you from? Don't tell me what I can't build in my, because I built a sweat house. I have a sweat house like we did and like our ancestors did. I built a sweat house. I used to have a sweat lodge, and but my crow dog would say that. You see, there's 4 directions, and there's animals in each direction. There's a buffalo in the north direction. He said, don't put buffalo in that direction. You're salmon people. Put salmon there. He said, you use colors, flags, white, yellow, black, and red, the races of the world, we say. That you have flags in the 4 directions. He goes, don't put that there anymore too. Put paddles because you're paddle people. He and my other teacher, Kelvin Pompana, passed. They encouraged me to make it my own. And talking to my elders, and just like I encouraged them in Scotland, do it your own. I went into Malahat and Duncan Jimenez, and they wanted to build a sweat lodge. I said, build it. Don't do it like me. Build a real deal longhouse sweat lodge. And they did, just a beautiful longhouse sweat lodge. And they said, no, you got to teach us. And Crow Dog said this to me because I brought somebody there, and I said, can we teach him now? And he goes, no, don't teach him. He already knows it. You might show him our way, but he already knows it. So I said the same thing to them. I said, do it your way. Don't do my way. You already got the teachings, and I know you do because I know you. So they built their lodge, and it's very similar. In the Sundance, we do it in the hot summer daytime, and longhouses, and then we do sweat lodges, hot, and the longhouse cold water bath in middle of the night in the winter. They're the same, but the opposite. There's 4 points of a longhouse, 4 directions. It's all, but even that though, it's like some of the places I've been and around the world, they some are secretive too. They're very secretive. When I was in Brazil, they said, you're the second person ever that's non-Amazonian that we're going to come witness the ceremony. I said, okay, cool. I said, let's go. And it's just, some of it's common sense too, you know. And I don't get in trouble. So we'll see how it goes.
You'll be all right.
Yeah.
There's 2 questions that I'm torn between asking. Oh, now there's third.
Oh, wait,
one that I
should we go back to the,
Oh, if you like, yeah. Anyone in the room?
okay.
All right. One of them has to do with, oh, I just lost it. Is there an event or a moment that has made you who you are today?
I think it's a horrible story. In my book, I got in this brutal fight, and they had a crowbar and they bashed me in the head, and I went down on one knee. Then they hit me in the shoulder and messed up my shoulder. It's still messed up. And then they got the pointy end and stabbed me here. So I got like, and then the cops came, and there's a big fight, and I didn't even, it was bad. And anyway, they went to the hospital, and I got like, I think 40 stitches on my leg, and I got 20 on my head, and they held me, just loosely bandaged me. Then when I started sobering up, they said, okay, we're gonna go to the hospital, and I did. And I was wearing white jeans, and the blood from my head went all the way to my jeans, and I had this wrap on my head and my arm in a sling, and lost my wallet, and I only had 40 cents. So I walked from St. Paul's down to Granville to catch the bus to North Vancouver, and I was like, they might not let me on the bus to go home, and I don't want to walk home. I look like a mess, and I looked before the door of the bus opened. I saw my reflection, and what the hell am I doing in my life? And then I got on the bus and I put the money in, and he's like, that's not enough. And I was like, please. And then he let me on. Then I had to go back and ask for a transfer. And it was a walk of shame. And then I got off the bus, and it was community day in my community, and all the kids came around, Uncle Rueben. And I got home, and I was so much shame. And that was the beginning of my healing. I think a couple things happened like that. And I thought, geez, if I was super popular, like in high school and then in the nightclubs, I was very, very popular. And, you know, I loved reggae music, and I partied with UB40. They're big back then, and Third World and the Marley family, Ziggy Marley. And And anybody, I want backstage pass. I didn't even have backstage pass. I just walked in like I belonged to Midnight Oil and Tragically Hip and Rolling Stones. I went backstage, and I just like I felt I belonged. So nobody had asked me. I was this young skinny guy that I thought I was really cool. So they did too. So they wouldn't. But then I thought, God, if I die, nobody's gonna remember me except for being a really good partying person. And I thought I want to do something with my life, and then here's the other thing. I did way too much drugs and I overdosed a bit. Not a bit. You can't do that a bit. And but I came home. I slept for 2 days. Then I went and sat on my brother Damien's porch, and he came out and he said, "I prayed you'd come." And he goes, "Shoot, but I prayed Uncle Len to be here." And he walked out of the bushes, and I went, "Oh, geez." And they talked to me and they said, "Hey, you got to do something. We're worried that you're going to die, and we're scared all the time," because all my behavior was like that. And I said, "Okay, I will, but not now." I said, "In a year." But I was already doing ceremony for a year. So I'd open a can of beer and I'd go to take a drink and I'd start dry heaving. So my spirit was already rejecting what I committed to stopping. So by the time I quit, I was really ready to quit. So those are, and even smoking cigarettes, I'd start to get sick. And just, so my body was physically was rejecting those things. And I wish I could say the same for Mellow Donuts, the most popular donut shop in Canada.
Wow, you can't have
Actually, it's the
everything.
number one.
That's excellent. There's a question about how and whether U.S. tariffs are impacting your projects and advocacy.
We're pretty scared a little bit, eh? Like, we actually haven't talked about it. We're still business as usual. The American dollar is good, so when we sell our hydrogen to our offtake in the States, it looks good. But I don't know if we told you this, but Lummies wants to create a free trade zone between Lumbee Nation and Canadian nations, and we'd be prime for that because we're their relations. So the Mohawks are doing that, and they have been doing that for years and decades, and we're hoping that would happen. But the other idea is duplicating what we're doing here in British Columbia for Washington State, not just Washington. I think I-5 and I-90 is as far as we could go.
Wow.
And but yeah, that's what we're talking about.
So getting around sort of the political situation in the U.S. by working nation to nation with other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but also duplicating what we're doing. So
Yeah.
creating hydrogen there, but that'd be hard too because their energy. We're looking to get a preferred rate from BC Hydro,
Right.
and I hope we will. Talking about meeting people in the right places in the right time. The president of BC Hydro, he wants to be my buddy and took me to a football game, and we talk once in a while, and is also he's the president of PowerTech, but is also vice president of BC Hydro. So I think that's going to work out. But we need, it'd be hard to create hydrogen down there unless it was First Nation or Native American power.
Right.
Because one thing we're looking at too is right people in the right time. Nation Vancouver Island, they're building 3 dams. They're a remote area, need an economic sovereignty. And I said, well, how about you partner with us and use your power to create hydrogen and sort of sell it yourself, then we'll distribute it. And they're like, sounds like a good idea. And I said, cool, let's do it. So we'll see what happens there. Yeah, for the Marleys, I could have. Yeah, I am. Oh, Uncle Len said that, he said, you're really good at organizing these big giant parties. Why don't you do it with goodness? So I do. We did huge rallies. Hey, Peter, huge 10,000 people that one. Worked on with Peter and with the healing stuff, I still organize good things. And yeah, so you're right. And same with the fighting. I feel bad about that, but I still have that fighting spirit to do good now.
This is wonderful. Thank you. There's another question here. How do you find it difficult to mesh your work in the science, energy sector and your spiritual beliefs?
That's the question, eh?
That's the question. It's right here.
Yeah. No, 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 I just want to do good stuff. Geez, you separate hydrogen and oxygen, the water, and when you put it back together, that's where the power comes from. It turns back in the water. It's like, we should have been doing this decades ago. It's like, look at the fires, 1,000. And here, do you know what sucks? The snow melt is so low. You know, was it last year? Lillooet, there's a piece of the Fraser River that the salmon couldn't get up to because of a little landslide and because of the drought. And for 3 weeks straight, the Lillooet people and then a bunch of friends came in, catching the salmon in the net and passing it up for 20 yards into the next part of the river. They did that, you know, and it's going to get worse. So, you know, that's the science. That's the bad science. The good science is we're coming up with a solution. You know, I've been fighting something for so long. It gets hard, like, but I still do it. But it's good to work for something too. That's hydrogen.
How are we doing? I saw a sign. Are we actually? Yes. Okay. Because otherwise I'm going to ask him how to end the Indian Act and we'll be here for a while.
Can I say some closing words?
Of course, yes.
So, you know, I think one thing that when I find myself getting into something, I always realize it's never too late. You know, from going from the healing field to environmental field to business, and then going back into the healing field. It's never too late to do what you want and be how you want to be and take those risks. You know, better to work to find what you love than to stay something that's status quo, and I believe in that, and also too is like, if you don't like something, you could do something about it. When this TMX fight, my own cousins in the very beginning said, "You won't win. It's a very big company that Christy Clark and Alberta and Canada support. You won't win." And I said, "But we're Tsleil-Waututh." "Oh, okay, we better do something." And but you know, and everything I do is like, you know, I have faith and belief in my kids are great, my family's great, my allies are great, but you start to create some things that you didn't have when you're raised with those fundamentals of humanity. That's good. But if you're not, if you love, honor, respect, dignity, pride, all those things I was talking about, if you didn't get it, what did you get? And if it was bad, deal with it, and then continue to grow and find out who you want to be. Especially you guys in school, you start to create what you want to do. Before I was done school, I knew I was going to create a treatment center. That was my mid-20s. And I wrote a grant, and people, you probably won't get it. Then pretty soon, every grant we're writing, we're like, whether we're going to get it or not, we didn't worry about. We're wondering how much money we're going to get. And we're innovative. We figure things out. With Wilderness Committee, we read books on advertisement. We read books on what they're doing and how methodical they're thinking. And, you know, it's like the Social Dilemma, the movie. We're looking at things of how they change the algorithms, and we try to do that too. We you know, the insurance companies, nobody's doing that. We started doing that, and the banks and all that stuff. Concerts, you know, Snotty Nose Reds kids are nominated for 3 Junos, and they're always asking me to do stuff with them. "Hey, we want you on our CD." And I said, "Why don't you get somebody young and hip?" "No, you're hip and you're not young, but you're hip." So I did a speech on their song Freedom, but they got some good things coming up and they want me to be part of it. And I'm like, "Oh, geez. Okay." But and that going back to Cedar when he was a little kid. or he's a teenager. He's like 16 or 17. I said, how do we get more kids involved? It's easy, Dad. Clothes, music, and food. So we did that. We did concerts, we did clothes, had meals, and we're always trying to figure things out. And I'll end with this. All my spiritual teachers had a room with all their spiritual artifacts in it. And we'd sit in that room. If there's a problem with the family, they pray on it and find a solution. Problem with the community, they pray on it and find a solution. In our culture, in Lakota, you do a vision quest to pray on something and find a solution. 4 days and 4 nights up on the mountain, no food, no water, just pray and meditate. And then you find a way, a vision for your future. But, you know, these guys, my teachers sit in the room, so my whole house is like all spiritual stuff. So when I come to a problem, even with myself and my health, hitting a wall again, jeez, and you know, my kidneys, but we pray and find a way. And I make up my mind that I'm going to be better. And it works. But find a way that sees fit. If there's a problem, find a way for that solution. Find a way for it. The right people, the right places, the right things will come. It comes, and people say, you're really lucky that way. I said, no, I pray on that. I want that. I want that. With us sharing that today in our staff meeting, if you believe in something with everything that you are as a human being, you're physical, you're mental, you're emotional, and you're spiritual. And if you believe in it so much, eventually your spirit believes in it, makes your path to your goal easier. Not just like spirituality. Spirituality is about that. And it's about being good people. Nothing wrong with making good people better. I thank you.
I hope I can call you my new friend because I feel like we'll have more conversations. But it's been a privilege and an honor to speak with you today. And I think that ends the formal part. Leonard, I'll turn it back over to you.
Hi, everyone, again. Thank you for joining us tonight. And then again, thank you, Rueben and Shannon, for your time, wisdom, and the valuable insights you shared tonight, especially on the ceremonies, spirituality, and the healing parts. Your contributions not only advance sustainability, but also deepen our understanding of Indigenous education and then its vital role in shaping a more just and then inclusive future. Now I'm inviting Shamta and Kate up to the stage, and then we've prepared some friendly gifts for you, Ruben and Shannon.
Thank you. Good to have you. Thank you. That was loud. Oh, thank you.
Okay, thank you again. And then also Ruben has agreed to stay and then sign some books. If you got books and then you'd like to obtain his autograph, please join me outside in the atrium where we also have the UBC bookstores who are, have a lot of books if you want to buy one. And then also I was able to confirm the catering. The owner is Dennis from Musqueam First Nations. Thank you. Oh, and also please feel free to grab any food left over and then drinks too. Have a great night.